Once the tinnitus sets in, then it's usually not long after that that the ringing in the ears becomes voices in the head.
Today we're going to talk about mental health. The World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Good mental health is a lot more than not being sick.
Lookoutfa Charlie.
This is not normal.
Alright, it's October and it's Halloween time and people want to talk about spooky stuff. So let's talk about the Amityville horror and everything that happened around it. For those of you who don't know, it was a home owned by the Defeos. The son, Butch Defeo, allegedly murdered the entire family, who were all, coincidentally, sleeping on their stomachs and didn't even wake up to the sound of the rifles going off. They just laid there on their stomachs and got shot. It's very similar to what people have to do when they're raided by the police or an agency. They have to get on their stomachs. So that's a very strange thing. After that, DeFeo went to prison and the Lutz family purchased the home and they were ran out within 28 days. Due to all this quote-unquote paranormal activity. Here's where I'm going to splash a big bucket of reality all over this whole thing, because it's not what people think. And a lot of people have these attitudes like I just poo-poo the paranormal, and I have a big problem with the paranormal, or I don't believe in the paranormal, or I just don't believe in any of that. They don't realize that the paranormal, and even a lot of the attitudes that I talk about, used to be me. I used to be one of you. And I believed all of it because there was no other rational explanation to it. But I have since moved beyond that and I am in a different headspace now due to over a decade of evidence, well over a decade of evidence and experience and learning about all of this. I no longer look at it the same way. But yeah, I used to be one of you and my attitude has changed immensely about the whole thing. MK Ultra started in 1952. 1952 was when it officially started. By the time Amityville happened, this had been going on the West Coast for quite a number of years. John Linley Frazier and Herbert Mullen, who killed people due to the earth or to stop a catastrophic earthquake. You had all these crazy scenarios going on and they were all on the West Coast. Santa Cruz, in LA, and then eventually it made its way over to the East Coast and it started with Amityville. You had Son of Sam and you had other cases going on after it was, fine-tuned on the West Coast. So a lot of people couldn't recognize this and didn't know what it is, and MK Ultra had already been going on for 20 some years, over 20 years before this happened. And the whole point of MK Ultra was to wirelessly get into somebody's mind and get them to kill or to weaponize it, to make a family destitute, to do a number of certain things. They wanted the ultimate weapon, the mind weapon. And that's exactly what they had. So a lot of these people who don't realize that they're on the receiving end of weaponized RF or ELF can believe that they are haunted, that they are psychic, that they are in contact with aliens, that they're possessed, or they're harassed by demons or ghosts or whatever. A myriad of different scenarios, and they're always the same. And that was the whole purpose of MK Ultra. And once these audio and sound weapons were created and fine-tuned, they went to work testing them. And it started on the West Coast and it went to the East Coast. And that was back in the day where they had to kind of set it up. The frequencies and the agents that they used to sensitize people to this stuff had to be kind of set up in the house, where now they can hit anywhere at any time. It's a big difference. A dream come true would be to get somebody like George Lutz or anyone heavily involved with this stuff and really get them to see the light and realize that these paranormal events have hallmarks for a reason, and those hallmarks are there because they are weapons. It's weaponized frequency and psychotronic weapons in general, and not paranormal happenings. You know, back in the day, you used to hear a lot about how some of these people who were targeted with these weapons, if they walked backwards or did things backwards, the voices would go backwards, which is very strange. Now, here's one of the quotes from somebody who experienced the Lutz house and how they heard backwards voices. Let's check this out.
There was a group of figures standing outside of the door saying the Our Father backward.
So this woman was in the Amityville house saying the Our Father, and she could hear these figures saying the Our Father backwards.
Figures standing outside of the door saying the Our Father backward. I thought,
God.
Excuse me, but that doesn't sit well with me.
So, you know, you hear something backwards. It's technology. It's not demons saying it backward. And the body of evidence on this channel alone will prove to you what is what. Now, the next clip I want to play you has everything to do with audio weapons, how they operate. And you can hear people talking about this in modern times all the time. They will be lying in bed and they will hear what sounds like somebody talking out in their driveway, right near the window, out in the hallway. Or they will hear what sounds like music through a fan, if a fan is blowing. If a air conditioner is going, they will hear orchestra music or hear music in general, or what sounds like an orchestra tuning up. And what those are, they are pure tones, and they are octaves being made by this ELF and what is coming in and coming into the home through RF and by piggybacking on the power grid. So let's listen to what George Lutz says here.
I would be laying there in bed on my back, and everyone else would be asleep, and the house would be quiet, and I'd be getting ready to go to sleep, and I would hear, or I would be already asleep, and I would wake up to a sound of musicians, like, tuning up downstairs.
Really?
And I would think that a clock radio went off, and it was off the station or something like that, and there is no clock radio down there, but that's the first thing that comes to your mind.
And he describes it as a radio slightly out of tune, which is perfect. And that's exactly what these sound like when you record it, when you hear it coming through a fan or coming through an air conditioner, or just hear it at night when it's quiet. That is exactly what it sounds like, because it's a bunch of different frequencies. And when you isolate it and you hear it, it's like 1,000 different tones and voices running on at once, creating this whole ensemble of frequencies and tones at the same time. And it would sound like an orchestra tuning up. And you can never tell where it's coming from, because when you go out to the room to find it, then it will sound like it's coming from the basement or the driveway, or just, it's always somewhere else.
I wouldn't know what else it could be. Go down there, and there'd be no noise, and the dog would be asleep right by the front door.
So he's describing from the 70s exactly what is happening to people everywhere now. Now, I've talked a lot about in my older videos about finding what looks like Mountain Dew sprayed on things, like a mist that has gotten all over everything, or the rust that looks like a Schuanella red rust color, or even the black type grease. It's like a dark blue grease when you get it under a microscope and you look at it, but the naked eye it looks black. This stuff can be all over everything in a house that this is happening in. Now, this is not, you know, ectoplasmic goo or some bullshit like that. It even happened to those people that went and investigated the demon house in Gary, Indiana, and then had all that. They were like touching it and shit, which is totally stupid. And then they had shit begin to happen to them directly after that because they were sensitized to it. Well, here George Lutz is going to talk about the stuff that was in his house.
We had drips that got longer and longer. They were black. They were almost like an epoxy. And the longer we were in the house, the longer the drips came out of certain keyholes in the second and third floor.
Oh, so there was some basis in truth.
Yes, but not the oozing out of the walls.
Not the oozing, but something.
And then we would wake up in the morning and we would find this gelatin-like substance going from room to room. And you would think, well, the kids got into Jell-O or somebody did something. But there was no Jell-O in the house at the time, and the kids didn't do that. And it was sticky, and it was there. I mean, it was there for the...
So what did you do with this stuff? Just try and clean it up, or what?
So he said it was like a Jell-O-type substance, but he never mentions the color. He said there was black stuff coming out of the keyholes and the substance on the floor and all in the house. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing that I've been describing to people for years.
Up or
well,
what?
It was like spots. It trapped from room to room.
Uh-huh. Huh.
And Kathy would wipe it up.
Check this out. What's a haunted house without the power being messed with? So here George Lutz talks about the power.
You couldn't depend on anything. The one thing, thank God, is the lights didn't go out. At no time did they, they would flicker, but they did not go out.
They would flicker, though.
Yeah.
They would flicker because they're being affected by the ELF. And these ELF and these RF frequencies come in, and they also travel on the power grid. They get into the wiring. They use the wiring as sort of an antenna, and they travel in. And just like an EMP will make lights flicker, so does this ELF. It's not ghosts or demons, it is science, plain and simple. But people don't want to admit what is really affecting the stuff, and the fact that they have to test this on average people to see if they can get them to kill, or to see if they can get them to leave a house. Well, can we make somebody destitute with this? And that was the test. And it was set up for the Defeos. They got Defeo to kill. So why not see if we can drive somebody out of a house as well? And they succeeded. They actually were able to drive him out in 28 days. Now, it is very common for people experiencing these types of ELF weapons that have an effect on the brain. They can create shadows in their vision. They can create snow in the vision.
Sometimes when astronauts are exposed to cosmic rays, they even start seeing flashes of light every few minutes. Some space travelers are especially sensitive to flashes, while others never report noticing them at all.
Now, through manipulation, if you can create snow in the vision, you can also create shapes in the vision. So you can have smells, you can have sound, you can have a myriad of different things. So let's listen to George Lutz describe what he was experiencing in the home and what they were experiencing.
By the last week we were there, it was nightly occurrences of noises, things like odors coming and going, or Kathy being touched from behind by some unseen person, or Missy talking to herself and asking questions like Jody telling us about her imaginary friend that wasn't so imaginary, it turns out.
The little girl had an imaginary friend that was allegedly an angel named Jody that was talking to her. This is voice of God. These are voice of God weapons. It's the same thing that happened to John Linley Frazier, that happened to Herbert Mullen, that happened to people in California before it happened to David Berkowitz and the Defeos and the Lutz family on the East Coast. And they had these angels talking to the little girl rather than these people telling Herbert Mullen and John Linley Frazier to kill people to stop a catastrophic earthquake, which is just ridiculous. But, that's how they test this stuff. That's how it works. And a lot of people see the same case over and over and over right in front of them, and they can't put the pieces together when it is the exact same thing every time.
Imaginary friend that wasn't so imaginary, it turns out.
Yeah, she claimed to have an imaginary friend, right?
Yes, and she would come and ask Kathy questions like, do angels talk? And
really,
Jody is the name of the angel, and Jody is telling Missy that we're going to live there forever.
Forever.
Strange things. it's kind of off-putting. Our dog Harry would not go in that room that Mary was talking about earlier.
Okay, the dog wouldn't go in the room because ultrasound and or ELF or RF can cause an animal to not go into a room or an area if it's too strong, and it operates just like an electric fence with a dog, or an invisible fence, in stopping it from traveling any further or going in if it's too strong, and it was probably very, very strong in that room.
Our dog Harry would not go in that room that Mary was talking about earlier. The last night we were in the house was the reason not to stay there anymore.
So eventually it ran them out of the house, and they got their results because it actually worked. Basically, the military and or the government won that night. Now, a lot of times when people do overtly hear these audio weapons, what they will do is they will use every frequency to project the voices. So you will have high-pitched and low-pitched voices saying the exact same thing in unison. So let's say you have a 100 hertz voice saying it, and then a 300, and then a 500, and a 700, and a 900, and 1100, and on and on and on. And what you get is like a strange chorus type effect of voices that sound like it's kind of like robo-speak, but if you heard it and you were under the assumption that you were haunted, you would probably think it was ghosts. Now let's listen to him describe what happens when he tried to bless the house on his own.
Aside from having a priest in, you and Kathy tried to bless the house on your own, right?
Yes, we did, twice.
What happened?
We were told it didn't work. We heard this chorus of voices, as it's been described, asking us to stop.
They had the exact same thing that happens to people all the time now. But back then, it was a rare thing, where now people hear things singing and talking all the time, especially when they're in a quiet house with a fan running or an air conditioner running or a refrigerator humming along with the motor, or just lying in bed when it's very, very quiet. And that's when you can really hear things that you don't normally hear when the TV is on and the radio is on and things are moving around during the day. There's a lot more sound. So, this is very, very common now. And then these fake psychics will come in and they will prey on the people who are being tormented by this stuff. And they clear it by convincing these people that they've expelled the demons. Here's what happened at one point. He tried to have the house cleared, and this fake psychic took him for a ride, basically. Check this out.
And there were a couple times when it was a real struggle to just mentally keep going to Kathy's mom's house and not stop and check on my stuff.
So, George, why didn't you go back? What stopped you?
I went back once with another psychic. His name is Dr. Heffernan. He said that he cleared the house. He said that we would... Kathy didn't come with me. It was a Sunday afternoon. He had a little girl with him. He went into trance. He had someone else with him as well. And he said we would smell violets and know that the house was cleared. I didn't smell them. I wasn't convinced. And that was the last time I was there.
Isn't it kind of strange that this doctor would tell him, this psychic doctor, that he would smell violets when the house was cleared? And having smell sensations is one of the effects of ELF and these RF weapons in general. You can smell things that are not there. Your nose will be affected by this. I think it's very, very strange. Now, whether he was actually connected to this or not, I'm not sure. But I think it's awfully suspicious that they use a symptom of this as a sign that the house is cleared of demons and ghosts. And of course, with every haunting, you can't call out or use the phone or just use electronics in general. And it's funny because I get emails all the time from people that, and they really do say things like this. It'll just be like a really short email. And someone will say, the demons are real. Just saying. And it's like, well, wow, I never thought about it that way. So, I can collect all this evidence and show people that these are pulsed waves, that these are weapons, that this isn't real, and somebody can come along and just say, just saying, they're real. It's bullshit, and these people know it, and the burden of proof is on them to prove that these aren't weapons and that they are demons and ghosts that are actually affecting the electronics in your home. So, of course, he couldn't call out of the house because the demon would hang up the phone.
We tried to talk to Father Ray a number of times. We got phone static, got hung up on, unable to call him from the house. I would go to my office and I'd be able to talk to him and tell him what was going on.
So it almost sounds like his phone was tapped, or they had some type of control of his phone. It's not demonic. This is a operation. This is a tactical operation. This is a psychological operation. These are psychotronic weapons. That's why they call them psychotronic weapons. Psychotronic weapons exist, and at this point, again, MK Ultra was over 20 years old. 20 at this point in the 70s. And then the phone messes up live while they're talking. So let's listen to this.
Maybe something is following us. Who knows? Well, now isn't that strange? My phone is acting strange, too. Let's try this again. All right, let's give it a try. This is really weird. You never know. You never know. Sometimes just talking about these things seems to bring them on. I've been concerned about that for years.
It's almost like when a whistleblower or somebody gets on the phone with somebody and they have, or gets in a chat room with somebody and they have all sorts of communication problems. It's the exact same thing. But they want to perpetuate this because they love the paranormal community, the psychic community, the UFO community, because they can manipulate and perpetuate this stuff and keep it going. When these were operations, full-on operations. Now, Butch Defeo, the first family that lived there, he didn't just wake up one day and get possessed and kill his family. They believed that a entity or a haunting was happening in their home before the Lutz family ever lived there. And this went on for a long time. This was the beginning of one of these operations. And the church knew about the house because they had been brought into the house when the Defeos owned it to try to rid the house of these sudden ghosts and demons. And when you're talking voice of God weapons, you are talking very, very convincing technology, especially in the early 70s. Let's listen to what they had to say.
Well, did he ever break down and actually tell you what he really thought about that house?
Yes, he did.
And then
but it was after we moved out.
Yeah, and what did he say?
He said they knew about the house, meaning the Archdiocese, the Catholic Church.
Oh.
They knew that there had been things that had gone on when the Defeos were there. The Defeos had masses said there.
They had masses said there. The Defeos brought people in to the house to try to rid it of what was going on. And Butch Defeo was one of the first people on the East Coast to be weaponized by it.
That had gone on when the Defeos were there. The Defeos had masses said there, which may have very well triggered what went on for them, just like having the house blessed did for us.
That's not what happened. See, I wish that I could get someone like George Lutz or, any one of these people to come over to see the light of what's really happening. And once you put it all together and see it, it is so obvious that you can never unsee it again. Now, when you talk to as many people as I have over the years, you realize that these weapons have an effect on people who are around them all the time. It makes the smallest thing feel like a big deal. Everything is a chore. Going to the bathroom is a chore. Reaching for the remote is a chore. It takes away all motivation. Like, people do not want to do things when they're subjected to these frequencies 24 hours a day. It basically makes you really lethargic, like a different kind of lethargic, a motiveless You have no motivation. That kind of lethargic, very strange, and it's different than like depression. It is like an artificial depression where just everything seems hard. You don't want to leave. You don't want to do anything. So let's listen to George Lutz describe exactly that.
You didn't want to go out, and leaving the house was a problem. And so to venture someplace, you had to, like, form it in your mind. I didn't go to the office anywhere near as often as I had before this. I mean, before I'd go, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. I'd be lucky to show up 3 times a week while I was living in that house.
So check this out. This is when they actually just stopped doing things.
It didn't occur to us until much later that the house never really wanted us to leave. We would always invite people over. We would have, but we would go out of our way not to leave, not to go out someplace. While we were there, we had enrolled in a reupholstery course at the local high school. And we never went to any of the classes. I mean, Kathy went out and bought the material to recover the dining room set that we had bought from the Defeos estate. But we never
that's right.
just don't go out.
You'll see this in a lot of cases where people that were totally normal and active and did things will just stop doing things, and their lawns will be overgrown, and they won't seem to have time to do the things that they did before. It's a very telltale sign. It has an effect on people, and like I said, it will make the smallest thing feel like a giant chore, and people just won't want to do it. It just takes all motivation away. And that's exactly what happened to the Lutz family. And it has an effect on mood. One thing that people have noted is depression, and white-hot anger is how it's been described in the past by people. It can have an effect on everybody in their own way. But they can get males to a point of anger, it seems, many males, very easily with these frequencies.
The boys were treating each other differently than they had before we moved in there. Everyone kind of went to their own spaces at times. For each of us, we learned later, it was a different experience at times in the house. It wasn't like we all experienced everything in unison or saw the same things or heard the same things.
And this is where Art Bell asked him if he ever felt like he was going to do something like Defeo, and he wouldn't answer it straight up, but he said this.
I don't know that I'll answer you this straight out, okay, but what I will tell you is this. The tool we mentioned of humor?
Yes.
I told Father Ray many of the things that went on for us, and he was the one that told me about humor. That evil can't stand it, it can't be in the presence of it, it has no understanding of humor, it can't relate to it, and it drives it away. I had to learn the mental ability, if you will, to be able to think of something humorous when I would get a thought that I didn't like.
So you did answer it. You did get them.
So he got these feelings and he would use humor. Now that's very funny because this is exactly what I've told people and how important it is to not lose your sense of humor. Because the one thing that cannot understand humor is AI. AI does not understand humor, and it doesn't know how to react to it, and it doesn't know what to do with it because it cannot compute humor. AI cannot compute humor, and it can't compute sarcasm. Believe me, they are trying to get AI to understand humor and sarcasm, but it will always be a robotic approach. They can't compute it, they can't understand it. And I find it very, very strange that you always see these demons in The Exorcist and in Supernatural and all these different television shows and movies. They're always telling these dark jokes to people and messing with them and using really dark humor. But in reality, evil, this evil presence, is exactly like AI in the sense that it, or a computer in the sense that it can't understand humor. Now, when people get sensitized to these frequencies, it doesn't matter where they're at. I mean, it could continue to happen in one spot if it was controlled that way, but it could also happen anywhere else because they've been sensitized to the frequencies. George Lutz actually explained it as though it had a half-life, which is weird. So then it's really not the house that's haunted. Something else is going on, right? See what he has to say about it.
Do you think the effect of what had happened to you was gone or still in some way with you?
I kind of always looked at it, Art, like it had a half-life. I eventually came to believe that the half-life wasn't necessarily the same as it would have been for something radioactive, but that as time went on, it would go away, it would get less, it would get less. There were many times when we really made an effort not to blame everything that went wrong in our lives on the house.
Yeah.
And so we would be asked and would say, yeah, it appears to be over. It's over. For us, it's gone. And then so many other things would go wrong.
So yeah, very strange. Now, speaking of being sensitized to it, a lot of people have health problems. A lot of people have vehicle problems. These are all parts of being sensitized or being bombarded with RF weapons and the sensitizers involved in RF weapons. I've talked about the fungus and the Shillingella bacterias, and if you don't know, you'll have to go through my older videos. So their van began to act up, and when they left, they just had to get rid of the van. So check this out.
We got rid of the van because it developed a problem that wouldn't go away.
And this happens with a lot of vehicles that are exposed to this, whether it's in the driveway or in the area that are being bombarded with this, as they develop electrical problems or issues where the battery will keep dying, or he doesn't say specifically what it was. There can be a lot of different issues, but just like how modern ghost hunters will go to investigate these RF bombarded homes or ELF bombarded homes, and their batteries will always die in their electronics, and they think it's all paranormal. Cars will deal with the same thing, where the battery is always just being drained, like a massive parasitic drain on a battery, and people think it's paranormal. So, everything that happens to George Lutz is on the money comparable to RF, weaponized RF, voice of God weapons, and sensitization to this stuff. It just is. I was just talking about the fungus for a reason, because they went through all this. They had these substances in their home, the substances on the ground, all this different stuff, and George Lutz's wife becomes sick after they moved out of there. And let's listen to what happened.
That interview was some 8 hours, and she was hooked up to oxygen. She has a disorder, a breathing disorder called valley fever that is quite serious, quite debilitating, and right now she's still in a form of a hospital that deals with respiratory diseases.
Yeah, I saw the oxygen tubes.
Yes. Well, she's had a relapse since then. That was a very hard day for her.
So she has valley fever, okay? Now, what have I talked about on this channel for years? Fungus and the sensitizers that make people sick. Some handle it better than others. The symptoms are always a little bit different. And what is valley fever? Valley fever is an infection caused by a fungus. I find it very strange that somebody who lived in one of these haunted houses comes down with a fungal infection years later, just like everybody else dealing with this. They either blame it on black mold or some other diagnosis like this, and it is just, it's alarming, because the parallels are undeniable. Now, in this spot, George Lutz is talking about Butch Defeo and what he did. He describes MK Ultra, mind manipulation technology, and voice of God weapons in a nutshell without even realizing it. So let's check it out.
There's no doubt in our minds, never has been any doubt after living there, that a sane person doesn't do this to his family. And someone with any kind of right thinking or ability to reason, that reason has been taken away or has been obfuscated in such a way, occluded or clouded, or they've been separated from their reasoning powers in a way that most of us hopefully will never understand. There's no doubt in our mind that he was influenced by that house and that he was controlled, at least for a point. He provided a service to that, if you will.
So he did provide a service, and he was manipulating and controlling it. But it wasn't by the house. It was by the operators and the script writers that were controlling this weapon and testing it out on people on the East Coast. So let's get that straight. It's funny because people would rather think that this was demons or ghosts than believe that this is being tested on people. And it's funny because they would rather think irrationally than rationally to avoid it. And to tell you the truth, I would rather it was ghosts and something real, paranormal or spooky like that too, but it isn't. And you just have to get rational. This is what they were testing. They had been testing it for over 20 years by this point in the 70s. And it came to the East Coast. So, it's time for people to get real. And that's the reality. One of the telltale signs of radio frequency, RF or ELF weapons, is people hear footsteps or movement or the sounds of their house shot back into the house, like the sound of your cupboard doors closing or your windows or your front door or your back door opening and closing, things like that. It's never when you're there and you see it, you just hear it in the other room. Or people walking around. You can hear people on your roof or in your attic or in your hallway. You hear footsteps, things like that. It is typical. I mean, totally and completely typical. And this is George Lutz showing that he was thinking rationally and trying to think rationally through this before just jumping to the conclusion that it's ghosts or demons. That's what you're supposed to do. Those who are just quick to say something is anything other than something basic is a fool. So it just shows that he was pretty well grounded when he was dealing with this stuff and trying to assess what was happening.
I'm sure in your own mind to think of anything else other than the house.
Absolutely. When the odors occurred in the basement, you go looking for broken pipes or leaks.
Absolutely.
When you have noises, you go trying to look for the cause of them. Would be sitting in the kitchen at night, and the kids would be asleep, and you'd hear someone upstairs walking around. So you'd go up, and you'd find all the kids asleep in bed. So you'd come back down, and a couple nights later, you'd have some people over, and they would hear the same thing. Then you would know you weren't crazy, and then you would know that something's going on that you don't really understand. But that doesn't mean you just get up and leave your house.
Yeah, so he never planned on just leaving the house. He had to, for the sake of his kids. Now, I mentioned that the Defeo family all began to sleep on their stomachs, and they were all found dead on their stomachs. And there's a myriad of ways you can do this through psychic driving, through different techniques, and subconsciously getting you to do something in your sleep, and that is common now, totally common.
In by themselves, for example, everyone in that all my kids and Kathy slept on their stomachs in that house. After we moved out, we found out that the Defeo murders, the whole family had slept on their stomachs. They were all murdered in their sleep. None of them got up. None of them got out of bed or were awakened, evidently, by the sounds of the rifle going off, killing all 6 of them.
Yeah, so it's very weird. You have these same patterns happening to people. What I am talking about is way more interesting than the paranormal. If you look at it correctly, it is way more interesting than the paranormal ever could be, because of how often and how vastly it is being used now. And people have no idea. I totally agree with him about a lot of stuff. I just don't agree that his house was haunted. And it should be exposed. But he should be on our side exposing this with us if he really knew what it was. And that part, it's just sad. Hopefully, one of these days, somebody is going to get it.
And my own belief is that whatever exposes what went on there, whatever gets people to talk about this as a real problem that exists in the world, that's shoved under the carpet every moment that it possibly can be, and in all kinds of ways, and with all kinds of confusion, it should be exposed.
Now imagine that he was talking about RF weapons. That's like a direct quote from somebody talking about RF and ELF weapons.
Real problem that exists in the world that's shoved under the carpet every moment that it possibly can be, and in all kinds of ways, and with all kinds of confusion, it should be exposed.
And it should be. He's absolutely right. But we're talking about two different things here. And that's the sad part. Because, like I said, a lot of people that are on the receiving end of this have absolutely no idea what it is, especially in the 70s. But you should be able to get an inkling now because the info is out there. And here's more weaponized sound. Where he talks about what he was hearing. And a lot of people hear these types of sounds, something slamming into the wall, something slamming on the floor. It's related to the same ELF pulses and the pulses that cause the footsteps.
The boys beds were being lifted up and slammed down overhead of me.
So the boys' beds were being slammed down, just like the guy from NASA that quit NASA and thought he was being possessed by a demon and had what sounded like a truck slam into his wall, and there was, you know, a lot of audio along with his visuals happening. With all the evidence that has been accumulated on this channel over the years, it is so easy to put together that the Lutz and the Defeos were being targeted with the same weapon. So then he brings the dog up into his bedroom where this is really amping up, right? And this happens.
Well, I had brought Harry, our dog, up and tied him to the master bedroom doorknob for him to stay there right there. And he kept getting up, walking in circles, throwing up, and then going back to sleep again.
So his dog was getting sick. These are classic symptoms of ELF and ultrasound on an animal or on a person. They will make dogs react. They will make dogs not go into areas. It will make animals or people sick. It can give people or animals vertigo. You know, the possibilities are endless. Our brains operate on ELF frequencies, and all animals' brains operate on ELF frequencies, and when you invade or disrupt those frequencies, there are going to be severe repercussions. And like I said, a lot of people would rather think about this as outlandish possession, witch doctor shit, than look at the reality of it and face what really happened. You know, and eventually they gave their house to the bank because they didn't want anybody else to experience this.
We gave it back to the bank. Couldn't stomach the idea of selling it to another family.
So they gave it back to the bank, lost the house, and the operation was a success. And then the first family, you know, that lived there before, they had driven one of the family members to kill and to wipe out the whole family. And the Defeos were not liked in that neighborhood. They wanted them out. They thought they were gangsters. They thought they were organized crime, you know, and they wanted them out of the neighborhood. When these weapons are used, the audio side of them, there are so many tone clusters and sets of frequencies. Seriously, it's mind-numbing. It's mind-numbing to listen to. I'm going to play this sample for a minute, and this is from an average house that is very quiet, sounds loud, but it is very quiet. This is the kind of thing that would be just out of your audible range unless it were very quiet in the room, or a hot water tank was running, or your refrigerator motor, and you may begin to hear something like this. And the more you listened, the more you can tune into the frequencies and get lost in the tones, whether that be an orchestra tuning up or people talking or whatever. So let's check it out. Now you can literally get lost in that, trying to figure out what that is and what's going on. There are hundreds and hundreds of voices on top of each other in any given recording like that. But when the right sounds or right tones or right pulse is added, one of these voices will jump up. Here's another quiet bedroom, and you can hear the pulses going on, and you can actually hear the chirp of the high frequencies. In fact, let's look at this in spectral view. See these high frequency chirps here, 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 and here. Check this out. What is that, a bird in the house in the middle of the night? You can hear the voice after that. So pulse, voice. And you can see where the pulses are spectrally. So let's back this up. Let's give it a listen. See, pulse and voices. Then another chirp. And then a low frequency pulse. So low frequency here, chirp, low frequency. These are man-made. If you look here, you can see a chirp, one in the 6,000 hertz range, and then one around the 11.5, between 11 and 12,000 hertz range. Now, if you go over here, later on in the same recording, there is a twin chirp. Exactly the same, exact same frequencies. Let's check these out. They're around voices. Now let's listen to this chirp. Same exact chirp, man-made. And there's a voice right there. And that is a, let's look at it spectrally. See the pulse? That's a pulse. And here's another pulse here. That'll be a voice as well. And here are pulses, plural, with voices. So higher pulses mixed with a ELF pulse. There. Really crazy stuff, but 100% man-made. Just as interesting as paranormal, but it's a man-made haunting. Here's some more ghoulies that are operating off pulse communications. Let's go spectral again. You can see the pulses, straight lines, up and down, pulses. Now you're going to hear a voice come in, and then what sounds like a snore. This is not somebody snoring. It's part of this weaponized sound. It snorts a lot, and that's strange because a lot of people report hearing these pig noises as like demons or something. You know, it's funny, but it does this. Check it out. So right in the middle of this sentence from this guy, there's a snort / snore. Check it out. And what's talking is the alleged ghost. What people would say is a EVP, is a ghost, and it's not. It's pulse communication. %, man-made. Now this is one of the greatest pulsed examples ever. If you look at the pulses, they are almost spaced perfectly apart. This is why they keep all this technology hidden, so that people can't put the pieces together and understand what's going on. And this is all wireless, and it's been wireless for decades. So check this out. This is some amazing stuff right here. Pulses, pulses, pulses. What is that? Let's check it out. I mean, that is a chatty Cathy of a demon or a ghost, right? I mean, it just won't shut up. But do you hear the ELF pulses with it? ELF pulses. Bam, 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 bam. Also pulsed. If you want to zoom in here to the pulse communications, you can see by looking at them, it looks like tabulature. It literally looks like tabulature or old auto piano type punch out key notes. You know, it's just crazy shit, but it is 100% man-made. Here is where the system feeds back and chirps again in the exact same tones that it used before. And then it says husband right here. And you can hear the ELF pulses around it, blowing it out. So someone lying in bed could hear this. Okay, here was an old seance that I had, a very facetious and sarcastic seance, long time ago. And I'm asking these questions saying yes or no. And there's a whisper right away. And the same voice comes in here, and it says, not, we're out to get you, or whatever. It says, let's try as a demon. So it's literally saying, let's try as a demon. Let's try as a demon. And that's me. Corny as hell, not real. And lastly, here are many of the voices that people can think are outside their window or just chattering on in their driveway or in the other room or in the basement. I'm going to play it. It's a bunch of voices recorded in a house where there is nothing on. In all these recordings, there is no TV, there is no radio, there is nothing in a house with no neighbors above you, below you. It's impossible for voices to just be there. There are hundreds of examples all over this channel that explain how the thumps happen, how the cracks happen, how the steps happen, how the sense of touch happens, how it all happens. And I just wanted to show you some of the audio aspects of this. These were all half weaponized, half beta tests for these weapons and how they worked. And it's about time that people got hip to what actually happened back then and stopped believing the whole witch doctor paranormal things. This is way more interesting than this tired old BS. And that's it for now. Look out for Charlie.
Come on, do it!
Come on, do Nazi stuff.
Yeah, why won't he do the Nazi stuff?
Look out for Charlie.